Welcome to Session 4, Workshop 12 of the Ed Cloud Gathering. Elective Teachers Unite, Literacy and Non-Tested Subjects. Our presenters are Carla Rivera-Cruz and Blair Mishleau. Carla is a passionate advocate for educational equity for all children, has a decade of experience in education. She has served as an instructional coach and provider of professional development for hundreds of teachers and school leaders across the country to help them expand their impact in the K-12 educational setting. Blair Mishleau is a curriculum writer and personalized learning consultant passionate about the intersections of personalized learning, logistics, and student achievement. I can't wait to learn from Carla and Blair.
Well, that would have been so much better if it was Claire and Blair. Very fun. We're not muted though.
Nope.
Okay. So do we just get, oh, we're on. Yep. Great. Hey everyone, I'm Carla.
I'm Blair.
And we're so excited to be here with you all today. I taught my first years teaching, I was a middle school foreign language teacher. And since then I have started teaching juniors and seniors in high schools in a social entrepreneurship course. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because sometimes we non-tested subject teachers just don't really get the credit and the love that we deserve. So we made this session not only for you all, but for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Blair. I've been on both sides. So for my first years teaching, I was a reading teacher, 6th grade in Minneapolis. So very much a tested subject. And then for my last 3 years teaching, I was a technology specialist teaching 1st through 4th grade technology. So I very much know the pressures and the expectations on both sides of the spectrum, and I'm really excited to talk about that and how we can best support our non-tested teachers to be just awesome educators in their content and more broadly.
So we're gonna get started. We have a lot of props for you all today. So we just have like 3 or 4 slides that we're gonna pop up here, but we will be back and live and interacting with you all in a jiffy. But we wanted to set the stage a little bit with a presentation. And somehow not working.
There we go.
There it is. Okay. So again, this is us. Aren't we lovely? Cute. So here are our objectives for the next 45 minutes. We want you all to leave here with a better understanding of how to support literacy skills. And when we say literacy skills, we mean all 4 components. That's listening, speaking, reading, and writing without compromising your content area.
So by the end of the session, you will be able to access online resources to build your skills in literacy instruction through the lens of your content area.
All right, so first we're gonna start with the definition of literacy. So to be literate means to be able to read and write, also to show or have knowledge of literature, to be well read, and the third component, which is having a knowledge or a skill in a specific field. And so we've bolded and underlined to read and field because we really want to focus on what does it actually mean to read? What do we read? How do we read? And in what context? So when we talk about the field, we talk about multiple disciplines and how this relates to our everyday life. So we're gonna play a little game.
Yes.
You ready, Blair?
I'm ready.
Okay, so what are the different ways that we read or the different things that we read? So I'm gonna pop up an icon and you're gonna tell me what this means to you. You ready?
I'm gonna try my best.
Okay, go.
Playbooks.
Yes, we read playbooks, sports playbooks to be specific.
Time.
Time.
Data and charts.
Data and charts, absolutely.
Street signs or directions?
Yes.
I don't remember what this is.
It's also a street sign of some sort.
Road signs and like symbols.
And symbols, right? Like biohazard or whatever it is, things to keep us safe.
The stars.
We read the stars. That's my mushy cushy one that I had to add in there.
Maps.
Maps.
And like body language and feelings.
Yes, absolutely. Emotions, body language. So these are the ways that we read all over the place and all over our world. Now let's talk about different ways that we could be literate. There is, of course, being able to decode words on a piece of paper, but there are also other types of literacy like
tech literacy.
Of course, computer literacy.
game literacy?
Yes, gamers actually have a specific literacy. It's super interesting for those of you interested in that. I would read up on it.
Medical and like health literacy?
Absolutely. How do you take care of yourself? How do you nourish your body? How do you stay healthy?
Financial literacy.
Super important. Too many people don't have it.
And like artistic literacy?
Absolutely, the visual arts. And so I know that you have a story about a student. Do you want to wait a little bit so that we can tell it on the camera?
Yes, that sounds good.
So Blair has a story about this and about what it means to essentially have all of these different abilities to read and all of these different literacies, which really translates to multiple intelligences and emotional intelligences. So what we want you all to get out of this is that
the better we are about reading our surroundings and asking the right questions, the more prepared we are for life.
Yes, and our content areas are the ones that support this. So we as non-tested subjects sometimes think that we are not supporting our students in preparation for life, but we absolutely are. And so we're going to kick off by Blair telling you a story about one of his favorite, very intelligent students.
So when I taught in Washington, D.C., one of my students was, she was not on grade level for reading in terms of like reading words in a book. And like we were working through that. But something I found sometimes is that we didn't like celebrate her other strengths. And out of like all the people I've worked with in my professional career, like adults and kids, she definitely like was the most emotionally intelligent person I've ever had the privilege of working with. And she was a little fourth grader.
How did you know she was emotionally intelligent?
I mean, she would know that I was stressed before I knew that I was stressed. She literally would come up and be like, Mr. Mishleau, can I give you a hug? You look like you're having like a long day. I'm like, you probably have a lot going on. And like for a fourth grader to recognize that is a really valuable skill, not just in terms of like being a good human, but like that is a really valuable skill in a lot of different sectors, right? Like to be someone who can be that aware of other people.
Who can read other people.
Yes.
Which translates into emotional intelligence and emotional literacy. Love it. Love it. So how else can we support our students through the lens of our content? Next up, we're going to talk about how it is that we can support reading and literacy through the lens of physical education. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so here's where we bring things in, and Blair is my victim. So Blair, we have a variety of foods here. So if I'm a physical education teacher, I'm probably talking to my kids about nutrition. I'm probably talking to them about how to be healthy, but then also we encounter things like this, these lovely food labels that are sometimes helpful or sometimes not helpful. So we're going to determine the author's purpose. You ready for this?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give you first this beef jerky. What do you think the author's purpose is?
So I noticed on the front, it says all natural. So like maybe it's trying to make me think that like this is a really healthy food. And then I also see that like on the back, it says crafted in the USA and there's a little like American flag. So I wonder like if that's like trying to like persuade me that this is a quality product. It's made in America.
Okay, next up, we got some string cheese. Obviously, I've eaten it all. As you can see, it is empty. Back here, we can see our food label as well as a little QR code. So what do you think the author is assuming about us based on this packaging?
So it a serving size is 1 stick, which like for me, I'm a little bit thicker. I like want to eat like 2 or 3 servings. So it's assuming that I'm going to eat 1 stick. I also see that calories, it's really big. If you look, it says 80 calories. That's like really large size font. So it might be assuming that I care about the number of calories, even though like the number of amount of saturated fat is pretty high. There's 3 grams of saturated fat in just like 1 little stick. It's also assuming that I have some tech fluency because the QR code is on the back and like my mom probably doesn't know what that means.
I know what a QR code means. I've never used one in my life. I only use it when forced to use it. Okay, next up, and then I have some more questions for you. So these little trail mix packets that I would say author's purpose may be deception, maybe not realizing that I'm a tiny human, and this is 310 calories, which is a quarter of the amount of calories that I'm supposed to eat in a day. So assumptions over here.
Well, so one assumption would be your daily intake. So this assumes that your daily needs are 2,000 calories.
And they're not.
Yeah.
I only need 1,200 calories to survive.
Yeah, and for me, that might be like more than that. I don't know.
I know.
It's also really interesting because your nutrition facts are like really tiny.
So hard to see.
So I don't know the intent behind that, or if it's like part of like regulation or based on the size of the package, but that definitely is like a very different felt experience as a reader compared to the other products we've looked at.
Okay, and the last one, which breaks my heart the most, this popcorn. It's delicious. It's kettle corn. It makes me so happy. And then lo and behold, I read the nutrition facts, and it says that one serving size is, first of all, 2 tablespoons, which almost gave me a heart attack, unpopped. But then one bag is 3 servings. And let's be real, I can eat a whole bag in 1 serving. So what exactly is the author assuming here? That I have self-control?
Well, see, so I get confused because it says like 2 tablespoons unpopped, but that assumes that like you're going to tear the bag open and measure up 2 tablespoons.
And then leave the other bag empty.
Yeah, like that's not how microwave popcorn works. It has to stay in the bag for it to pop.
And just by, yeah, exactly, by nature of the packaging, it's like, why even bother putting that in there if you know that if once I open the bag unpopped, what am I going to pop the rest of the kernels in? Yeah, there's no like actual way to measure. It's not helpful.
2 tablespoons unpopped. So yeah, I guess the author's purpose is maybe like compliance there. I wonder if that's like a federal regulation they have to like, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about regulations because as we were preparing for this, Blair actually told me something that I think was amazing that I had no idea.
Yes.
So let's talk about regulations for food labels.
So, and this is something that like is like a really good fodder for like deep discussion in a physical education class is terms like all natural. So like this beef jerky says all natural at the top. That's not actually a regulated term. So you could like have like a can of like Mountain Dew and put all natural at the top because the federal government does not have a regulated definition of what all natural means.
Or a policy or procedure that says you have to go through this checklist in order to be able to put all natural on your packaging and get our stamp of approval. You can put anything on packaging.
As opposed to like this, like this popcorn is not genetically modified. So that is like regulated through the non-GMO verified project. So that has to go through some level of regulation.
For you to be able to put that little seal on there.
And same thing for like USDA organic. Like there's a clear processes. But for all natural, that like you could be eating garbage and it can still be labeled all natural. And there are other terms like that, like pure. Like there are a lot of different terms that are not regulated that folks will put on packaging. Like the term light, L-I-T-E.
Not regulated.
Not regulated.
But L-I-G-H-T?
Yes.
Regulated.
Yep.
Sneaky. Which leads us to intent. So what is the underlying intent of companies as they're deciding how do we package what we're trying to sell?
And they want to sell product, right?
They want to make money.
Yeah.
And they're assuming things about us that we're going to respond to all natural. We're going to respond to L-I-T-E light because they're assuming that ultimately we do want to put healthy things in our body. But are they capitalizing on our desire to want to be healthy, knowingly giving us things that really aren't that healthy?
And also like capitalizing on our like focus on calories. As Americans, we're very focused on like how many calories does this have, but we don't always focus on like the quality of those calories, which is something that if my physical education teacher talked about when I was in middle school and high school, I would have been a much like more informed adult.
And consumer, because to be honest with you, I definitely, until I saw the documentary Fed Up, I definitely was buying these things thinking that they were good for me. So one of the things that I did also for our viewers is that all of the questions that I asked Blair were the top 3 tiers of Bloom's taxonomy. So I highlighted all of the question stems that I wanted to ask him in order to make sure that I brought him to a higher level of analysis and evaluation. And stay tuned till the end because you'll get a link to these question stems at the end of the presentation. Thanks, Blair.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think I'm going to eat these honestly anymore.
I'm feeling really snacky, so you can just leave.
Oh, you can open them. Go ahead. Feel free to snack while you're here. Next up, we're actually wanting to talk about how do we support this type of critical thinking and analysis, and really the questions that teachers are usually asking when it comes to a piece of literary text with other forms of text. So are you ready for our next two forms of text that we're going to be talking about? Drum roll. Enter, drum roll.
Oh.
Enter Muffin. All right, Muffin is a fixture in my living room. As you can see, I even have this fancy little light because I want to be very bougie. And so I'm going to ask you a few questions about Muffin. And all of my questions, by the way, are coming from another piece of a resource that we're going to be giving you all, which tells you what questions can you ask about a text. And in this case, Muffin is our text that are aligned to the Common Core standards. And so are you ready?
Yeah, dude, let's do it.
I'm going to be asking you first questions about close reading, key ideas and details, along with making inferences.
Cool.
But first, tell me, again, let me just for everyone's viewing pleasure, this is Muffin. I love her.
It's a monkey. I just want to name that.
Yeah, well, that was actually my first question. So let's spend a few minutes and look closely at my piece of text and tell me what you see.
I see a monkey dressed in what might be like Victorian garb, or I don't know. There's like a lot of bows and a lot of like rich colors. She almost looks like maybe a little bit like a member of royalty. Okay,
let's now move forward. Like, what are you noticing about the tone of this piece of text? So how does it make you feel? How do you know?
Well, so it almost feels like, I don't know, like, it's like, I don't know like how prepared Muffin was for this photo or this painting. Like, it's just kind of like, bam, like Muffin is not in a cute pose. Muffin, it's just like straight up Muffin. So it feels very like, I don't want to say voyeuristic, but like voyeuristic adjacent, or like predatory. Like, I don't know if Muffin like was chilling out in this outfit on her own. I feel like maybe Muffin was like cajoled into this outfit. So the tone feels a little bit like opportunistic, maybe.
Okay, so now let's also talk about, I want you to think about, make some inferences about what the author like is thinking, or what the purpose of the author was. So what do you think the author is trying to communicate to you through this painting?
I mean, I guess there's a lot of different things, right? One of them could be just like humans as a people. Like the author might be trying to communicate like something we talked about before was like a RuPaul quote, which is like,
yes,
what is it?
RuPaul says that we're all born naked. Everything else is drag.
Yes, and I feel like this like reminds me of that a little bit. Like everything we put on a lot of airs as human beings.
Yes.
Just trying to come off a certain way, and it looks like Muffin's trying to come off like a certain way, or is like trying to like be cajoled to come off a certain way.
Yes. So what I love about this painting truly is in my living room. And so people will see it and their first instinct is to laugh, but then their second instinct is usually like to think about it a little bit further. So I ask people all the time, what do you see? And I think it's really interesting because I've had one person say, I see somebody who is trying to be somebody that she's not. And in the same day, I heard someone say, I see someone who is being forced to be somebody that she's not. So there are two really different interpretations. Someone who's being forced or someone who is trying. So what has the author put in this photo or left out of this painting that makes it so open to interpretation and makes it so two people see literally opposing things? What do you think?
Well, I guess like Muffin's not making like a dramatic like facial expression, as you kind of put it, like more like a Mona Lisa smile. Like she might be smiling. She to me she almost looks a little sad. Like her eyes don't look like super happy.
She's got bags.
Yeah, she doesn't have like the crinkle you get when you're smiling. So like, but it's not like she's not clearly in distress or clearly really happy. So I think it's more open to interpretation there. I think there isn't any other in the background. There's not much to go off of. So it's open to interpretation there.
It forces you to only look at her.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to look at.
And her posture is just very neutral, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think also we don't talk often about like the context of the time. People used to pose for photos in those times like that. There was no smiling. There was no interpretation. So is it that Muffin is just not happy, or is that just what people did at that time?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So obviously our conversation is really rich because we're adults and we're kind of nerds and we're intellectual junkies. But how do we get students to actually have the same conversation? So you told me a story about your crappy teacher that I really loved. So tell me about, this is Blair now.
Yes.
But there was also 4th grade Blair who would not have been able to have that conversation.
Yeah. So I was actually in 3rd grade. So like very little.
Oh, it was 3rd grade.
Yeah, very little Blair. And
how old are we in 3rd grade? 8?
8 to 9.
8 to 9. Okay.
So my art teacher, like, I think like had like the best intentions for her class, but oftentimes just came across as like very angry and like very like, why do you not get this? Like, understand this concept.
Which all teachers feel that way sometimes, where you're just like,
very true.
I was awake till 2 a.m. preparing this. Why don't you get it?
Yeah, that's very valid.
But how could she have been more helpful?
Well, so I think, so I have like a very clear memory of her showing us a portrait. I wish I could remember the artist, but it was a bunch of dogs dressed in human garb, looking at like a movie in a theater. And she was like trying to help us understand like what the author's intention was around like having dogs instead of humans, and having the dogs in like human garb, like wearing suits and dresses, and why like the focal point was on a certain part of the portrait. And I remember her asking, one of the questions was like, well, like, what do you think the focus is? And us as like little 8-year-olds picking our noses, we were like, I don't know. And she was like, well, why do you think that the author chose to make the projector box, like the what do you call that? The thing that projects, the projector.
The projector, yeah.
The projector black instead of hot pink. And that question just like sticks out, because I'm like, as an 8-year-old, I was like, well, of course it's black.
Because
like,
there are no hot pink projectors in the real world.
It's a projector.
Yeah.
Like, it will be black. And then she got really annoyed and she was like, well, the focal point is this because of these reasons and blah, 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 blah. And I think that, honestly, she did not have good questioning techniques. And it probably comes back to, like, training. I don't know how well trained she was, but I don't think she had good techniques around getting students, scaffolding her questions to get students where they needed to be. So I think if she had had a resource that allowed for more questioning,
like this,
yes, she would have been in a better place. And like, would we have had a discussion like we just had? Probably not to that level, but we would have been able to unpack some things about that portrait that did not happen. Like, all I got from that lesson, even as a 28-year-old now, is like, okay, he did not make the projector hot pink.
Hot pink. Like, literally, that is what you were still remembering, which is crazy to me to think the things that stick with us, that when we were 8, these tiny things, I bet you that teacher doesn't even remember that lesson, but it is ingrained in your memory. So I'm going to continue to use these questions then. We're going to start first with key ideas and details again, and I'm just going to ask you what it is that you see, and then we're going to move further into analyzing individuals, events, how things develop in a text.
And I'm not sure if we've named this already, but these are aligned to the Common Core standards around reading and literature, right?
They are. They're absolutely aligned. So right now we're going to support Reading Anchor Standard 3, which is reading literacy, R.3, R.3. So the next picture is going to be, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Hopper's Night Talks. But just so that everyone knows what you're looking at, I'm going to go ahead and share on the screen very quickly a better version of this, or at least a more clear version. So this is Hopper's Nighthawks. So before we bring it back to us, let's just talk about, what do you see?
And also, like, is it okay for me to name like my history with this?
Absolutely.
Painting?
Yeah.
So what Carla had like shown you really briefly was the one that hangs up in my apartment. And I've actually had a version of this painting since I was 14, but I have never like analyzed it as deeply as we're about to. So it's going to be fun.
I know, super exciting. So are we ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask you is related to the first standard of the Common Core, which is related to key ideas and details. It's real simple.
Mm-hmm.
Let's discuss what you observe.
So I see a couple who's together, but I can't infer too much because they're not like deep in conversation. They kind of almost appear to be like obligatorily together, like, yep, we're here, we have to be whatever.
Side by side, kind of like us right now.
Oh, we are like
I'm just
in
kidding.
this. The woman like appears to be looking at something like that's not very interesting, but she's like trying to fill her time. And then there's another gentleman who's all by himself. And then we have the employee who looks like he's like trying to complete a task while also like trying to serve the needs of his customers. And then it also looks very like, thinking about point of view, we are very much like a third person, like removed point of view. We're not in the action. We're more so observing. It doesn't appear like they're even aware that we're there. And where we're at, it's completely desolate. I mean, there's nothing going on. Even if you look in the windows of the bedrooms of the brownstone, like there's no one there.
It looks abandoned.
It looks abandoned, yeah. But the inside of the restaurant looks really warm. I would say it looks inviting. There's coffee. You can even see like the napkin holders, like it's well detailed, whereas on the outside it's much less detailed.
You can see napkins, you can see salt and pepper shakers. One thing I know, we watched kind of a video of this, but even the 2 coffee urns, you can literally see the level of coffee in them. So the one on the left is pretty much empty, and the one on the right is about a quarter full, which I think is fascinating. So, okay, so that's what you saw. I want to go back to the vantage point. So I'm going to stop sharing. So let's look at that. So you talked about the point of view. So the vantage point of this painting. So what point of view are we looking at? This is a story. I could create a story behind this if I needed to. Okay, is this first person? Is this third person? Like, what are we looking at?
Third person, right? Because we are like fully removed from this story. And it's also, I would say, like, getting really nerdy, it's not third person omniscient because we don't know what's going on. We don't know the history behind these folks.
We're literally just observing. Okay. So my next question then is related to analyzing how and why individuals, events, or ideas develop and interact over the course of a text, or like even over the course of this painting. Because it's weird because I'm looking at it and of course it's standing still because it's a painting, but it doesn't feel like time isn't moving. It feels like time is moving slowly, but it still feels like something is going on. But here's my question. Based on the way that this painting makes me feel and makes you feel, what objects did the author or the painter place in here that is contributing to that feeling?
So, this is tricky.
No, it's okay, because they already know what we're looking at, so I would just talk about it.
So I think one thing that really sticks out to me and in the video that analyzes it a little bit more, hopefully can we share that after this? Maybe?
The video link of the analysis is in the one-pager as well.
Cool.
So yeah.
One thing that really sticks out to me is the cash register being the only object that you can clearly see outside of the restaurant versus inside the restaurant. As you mentioned, you can see all sorts of details. So it's much richer, and I feel like that's like where your eye is drawn and where like the bulk of the story is happening, if you will. So like you had said, like the salt and pepper shakers, the coffee urns?
Yeah, coffee urns, I think. And you know what this is? I was wondering what this is. I couldn't see it online. It's a glass. It's an empty glass.
Yeah. And then like the woman, I like need to go back to I think it's the Art Institute of Chicago that has it, but like see what she's looking at. She's looking at something.
Yes, she is.
Right? Which like
she's holding something in her hand.
And I'm like, is that a book of matches? Is that like a sugar packet? I don't know. But her interest is on that instead of the man she's next to.
Oh, yeah. She seems definitely, when you look at it more closely, she seems uninterested in the person sitting next to her.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what do you think is what's the main idea of this? If you had to decide this was the main idea of this painting or what the author was trying to communicate, what would you say it is?
Well, thinking about the title being Nighthawks and like the patrons of the restaurant I mean, maybe the main idea is just like there are like lonely people anywhere, or like something around the idea of like loneliness and like community, because the rest of the space is completely desolate. I also like know that this painting was done in the height of World War II. So a lot of communities,
context.
A lot of communities were really like a lot less populated. So maybe like an idea of loneliness or like community or something around that.
Interesting. And that kind of brings me to, I know we're talking about supporting listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. So we've been reading this entire time and speaking about what it is that we're seeing. But how could we also bring in either a written component or a comparison component? So what other text could we add to this to get students to continue to analyze this painting in the context of World War II?
Well, I mean, Hopper has tons of paintings that were done in this era and outside of this era. Also, like thinking about Muffin, right? Like comparing something that's completely different in terms of subject and era and artist and style could be helpful.
Love it. Okay, so that's that. That's literacy through the art or through the lens of art. So we've now done through physical education. We've now done art. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I want to remind folks that like even if you're not a ed teacher or an art teacher, which neither of us have ever been, the spirit of this can still like happen in your content area, even if you're like a world language teacher, like thinking about the spirit of connecting exploration of a medium or a piece to literature, and like thinking about like, is there a time that I could talk to my students' reading teacher during my prep, like in the teacher's lounge, just spending a minute or two being like, what are you covering? And how could I craft a really good question to connect to that?
For sure, for sure. And I also think like this is where I always realize I'm having like a little epiphany. We are all in the business of moving and influencing others. And we don't work in isolation. We don't live in isolation. We are constantly waking up every day with a task at hand and saying, how do I motivate and move other people to believe something, to do something? And whether you're an author writing this epic novel that is kind of like a satire of the human condition, whether you're an artist, whether you are writing a food label, we are all trying to influence other people and bringing those questions in and allowing our students and helping our students literally sift through that by asking the right questions and saying, who made this? Why did they make it? What was their purpose? What are they trying to get you to do or get you to feel or get you to believe? And then taking it a step further and being like, do you believe that? Like, are you bought in? How could it look different? I think is great. And that's the spirit of this presentation. Okay, so let's talk about computer literacy. That's going to be our next one. So coding, tech.
So I, for the past 3 years, was a technology teacher. So I pushed in for a weekly technology class. So I saw every homeroom in my school once a week. And, you know, talking about like literacy, like tech literacy was like my brand and like my bread and butter and what I was trying to help students develop. That being said, there were a lot of connections to broader literacy. So I just want to share a couple of examples. And again, I think these are applicable to all subjects, but I will talk about it through the lens of tech.
And communication.
Yes.
Can you talk about, are you going to do coding, Mr. Mishleau?
Yes.
Okay.
So
yay.
I'm going to talk about the Google Doc books that I had kids write. So Google Docs, super important, like pretty much all adults use Google Docs. So I wanted students to understand the Google Apps suite really well, but I also knew that this was a good opportunity to work with their homeroom teachers on what they were currently studying in terms of reading. So in my third grade classes, each student wrote a book about their favorite animal, and I connected with their homeroom teacher to see what they were working on, be that like transitionary words or like conveying a really clear idea with the title of their book, like things like that. And it was not
captions.
Yes, and citing their sources. So in their books, they added images and they had to cite their source of where they got that image from, which was something that they had been working on in their class. So while they learned tech skills, and that was a at the core of this project, they also were really able to build strong writing skills, and we did a gallery walk of all of the books so that they could read each other's, and every page had at least 5 complete sentences on it. So I'm really proud of that, and I think that just speaks more broadly. I did not spend hours collaborating with the reading teacher. I really just had a conversation with them, and that was able to create a cross-class connection. One other thing that I did was I had a virtual word wall. So in my tech class, I had a little cart. Like, it was not like high class. It was not bougie. It was very scrappy. I pushed it in the classrooms, and you might think like, oh, you can't do a word wall. But on the PowerPoint that I used each week, we had a technology word of the week, and that might have been like refresh or browser or internet. And we had a visual description of that. We had an example in a sentence. We had a non-example. Then we did a turn and talk where peers got to use that new word in vocabulary with their peers. And each week that got added to the virtual word wall. And then every couple of classes, I was able to do a little competition of having students do a turn and talk using some of the words we use. And then the last thing I think—
that's literacy.
Yes, that's literacy.
Without compromising your content.
Yes, it was very clearly tied to that, which was really cool. And then the last thing, which I think is the most fun, is programming Mr. Mishleau.
Well, coding is language.
Yes, coding
is another language.
Yep. And that's something that was one thing that I introduced to students, is like to say hello in English, German, or French. Like, you say it in different ways, but it means the same thing ultimately. So we talked about like telling something to move in JavaScript or C++ or Blockly. It looks different, but it means the same thing. And one of the ways that I communicated that to students,
I love that,
was focusing on specificity. So if you want a character to do something, you need to be specific. So I would use my body as an example, and it'd be like, all right, you're trying to get Mr. Mishleau out of the classroom. What do you need to do? And students would be like, oh, walk. So I'd start walking, but I'd eventually run into a desk or run into a kid. And they thought that was really funny, but it also was a really helpful lesson to name that was not—
because you never said stop walking.
Yep. And
or
you never
walk
said
2 steps.
Yep. Walk 2 steps and then turn right. Walk 4 steps, then turn left. Walk 5 steps and open the door. So it was really helpful to teach them specificity and how they write things, and thinking about their audience. Like, when your audience is a computer, you need to be extremely specific, because the computer is not going to understand, it's not going to infer, oh, there's a door, I need to open it. It's going to read what you said, which says walk. And then Mr. Mishleau is going to walk into the door and hurt himself. And that was really helpful for kids, but it also helped more broadly to connect to literacy.
Unless you live in Westworld on HBO, in which case the artificial intelligence starts to have a mind of its own. Great, I love that. And it's just, again, another example of you do not have to compromise your content. Mm-hmm. When a principal says, we're all reading teachers, yes, we are. We're all literacy teachers. We're all reinforcing listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we can do that in our own way. And
it enhanced the content, ultimately. It made my class more interesting for kids, and it connected to things it connected to their prior knowledge.
I totally agree. So there's one more thing that I really love, and I'm going to share my screen again because I just love the photo. And I want everyone to see the photo because it makes me happy. So what about something as simple as a class pet or a class plant? So is it a mouse? Is it a gerbil? What is this?
Cute.
It's adorable.
It might bite you, who knows?
Okay, so how do you incorporate listening, speaking, reading, and writing literacy skills in something as simple as maintaining a class pet or a class plant? And I have the answer for you all. So it is doing something as simple as, can you write and create a manual on this is how we take care of our class pet or class plant? Mm-hmm. The pet has to go somewhere on the weekend. Wouldn't it be interesting if, as a reward or as an incentive, a student could take home the little mouse, but with it comes this class-created manual that says, this is how you keep the mouse alive. This is what it needs to eat. This is how much water it needs. Here's how you clean its cage. So that incorporates writing skills, definitely, and communication skills. But then we also need to talk about observing your class plant or your pet. Like, if all of a sudden, well, this is more like for a fish, but when a fish starts to die, where it starts kind of going sideways and not moving, read that body language. What is the fish telling you?
Time to flush it.
No, you don't want to bury it in a little box. You just want to flush it down the toilet. Or your plant. What happens when all of a sudden you start to see that the leaf is turning brown? What is it telling you? What does it need? So there are so many ways that we can incorporate these types of skills if we just open ourselves up to the possibility and open ourselves up to be inspired.
And one thing I think that's really interesting with the idea of a class pet or a plant is that students have a very like strong motivation to get that class manual right? Because it's not like some hypothetical thing. Like I remember when I was in 5th grade, we had to write instructions. Like I had to write an essay about how to make macaroni and cheese. And if I got it wrong, you couldn't write, like,
We're not really making mac and cheese.
No one is making mac and cheese. But if you don't get the instructions right for the class pet, like one, the teacher's probably not going to let anyone take it home because we're not ready to take care of it. And like worst case scenario, the animal dies because we forget to feed it or if we get to like poke air holes.
Can I tell you a story that actually relates to this?
Yes.
My friend asked me to take care of her betta fish in between our freshman and sophomore year of high school. She did not write instructions. She just told me the instructions for feeding, and I didn't remember them. Her instructions were to feed the fish every other day. I, being so loving and giving the fish every day.
Yikes.
And that was the betta fish I was telling you about, that slowly the fish started going sideways, and then it was all the way sideways, and then it was upside down, and it was dead because I overfed it.
It's not good.
I gave it literally twice as much food as it could withstand, and it died.
That's not good.
And that really was a bummer for me.
Yeah.
That was an ultimate failure.
And one other thought that I have around this like instructional manual idea is like the opportunity to collaborate, right? Like if you have a collaborative class Google Doc where everyone is like owning a specific section, that's teaching so many skills around like reading each other's body language. Like, how are you feeling as my teammate around like the section we're writing?
Yeah, do I trust you like to actually get this section done? Love it. So I want you to talk a little bit about Someday Monday as well, because we just like threw all these ideas, probably overwhelmed our audience. So what would be your parting thoughts about the content?
I mean, Carla, teachers have nothing else to work on. What are you talking about?
We have no list whatsoever.
No lesson plans, no
laundry to do, no grocery store to get to.
No. So the purpose of this slide is to really think about like someday you'll have a cute class pet and you'll teach tech skills and you'll have Muffin in your classroom. It will be great. There will be a light on Muffin. It will be lovely. But Monday you have to teach kids. So someday, like you might have like broader aspirations, but Monday, what are you going to do? And that might be as simple as like, I'm going to use one of these questioning techniques really well. I'm going to ask one question that relates to something that's happening in my students' reading lesson that week.
So don't feel the obligation to implement all of these right now. However, here is your resources. So here on the bit.ly link is where you can find a list of questions. And even if you commit to only asking one or two of the questions that we shared with you in the packet, whether it's the Bloom's taxonomy questions or the Common Core Align questions, just start small. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, we have more Blair and CRC. So if you really loved us and you want some more of us, we do have a podcast. Well, I have a podcast out where I interviewed Blair. It's another 20 minutes of joy and wonder. So if you can't get enough of us, that's where you can find us. And then you can also email us, contact us, tweet at us, visit us on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation. And if you just want a little bit more a thought partner, or you want to be, I don't know, just get more ideas and talk specifically. Yeah, if you want to nerd out about your content. So I know we only have 1 more minute, so I'm going to go back for those who maybe were like scrambling for a pen and a paper, and I'll leave this here for another 15 seconds so that you all can either write this down or take a picture of it. That's usually the way that I do with my phone. It's a lot easier to just take a picture. And again, the bit.ly link is where you can get a link to all of the resources that we use to make this presentation and get ideas and inspiration for our content. And then this is how you can stay in touch with us moving forward. We have 30 seconds. Do you want to play word association?
Sure.
Okay, literacy.
Important.
Coding.
Fun.
Fat-free food.
Misleading.
Victorian attire.
Forced.
World War II.
Isolated.
Let's see. Gerbil.
Cute.
Plant.
Watcher.
Green thumb.
class manual.
That's it. I think we are all done. High five.
Oh, that was so fun.
All right. Thanks, Carla. Thanks, Blair. That was amazing. I just want to remind everyone.
We didn't see the question. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I just want to remind everyone. Do you want to take the question?
Sure, we'll take the question. What advice do you have for elective teachers to advocate for their areas of expertise? I mean, you can take it or I can take it. Advocacy is hard depending on who you're advocating to and in what space. What would you say, Blair?
Well, I think about like the root of that. So like if it's a principal who is like low on money and you're an art teacher and you're asking for thousands of dollars for the materials, thinking about like what is that principal concerned about? Are they concerned about the budget? Are they concerned about they just don't care about art? Like what is your audience? And if it's about and if it's about the budget, like I am a donors choose king. So like I have done like dozens of donors chooses and gotten like $35,000 worth of materials for my kids. So if it's about budget, like maybe you can hustle a little bit, versus if it's about just like seeing the value, maybe like finding value for your audience, I think.
Yeah, I would totally agree. When I think of advocacy with your administrators, that's definitely going to take perspective. You're going to have to take yourself outside of your content and into the role of the admins and what is their goal. And if you can align what their goal is to a way that your content can actually simultaneously support their goals, that would be a good place to start. When I also think about advocacy it's also for your area of expertise. So I'm not quite sure about the question, but I know as a specials teacher, one thing that was really hard for me was to get the support and the support of parents and advocating for the importance of my content. When we're constantly talking about standards and testing and English and math. And so that's also going to be a situation where you have to really either survey your students or survey the community that you're serving, really figure out what they love and what they're passionate about and what their goals are, and then align your content to that as well so that you can marry both and get kind of like the best of both worlds. But, you know, it's hard when we're super passionate. I had a biology teacher that was super passionate about bugs. Like, how are you going to make me want to get up every day and talk about bugs? You know, like we have to know what we really love and care about and somehow find a way to pull people in based on what they love and what they care about. That would be my answer. I don't know. You good, Kristen?
There we go. Carla, Blair, thank you so much. That was great advice. Indeed, a joyful session. I'd like to invite everyone to participate in the closing session Roz taught me. And again, our charity is No Kid Hungry. So consider paying the joy forward and have a great day.
Ciao. Thank you.